The controversial nature meant that we never thought about Broadway.
But it touched a nerve.
We became rock stars.
We only had 5 days to film. So we did an entire feature in 5 days. It was very, very fast moving. And then the edit was also impossibly fast. I don't even want to tell you how fast it was because I don't want anyone to ever ask me to do it that fast again. Because it's on Broadway, there's not a lot of footage of it. There's a lot of stills. There's a show capture from back in 2006. But on other projects, I'm watching hundreds of hours. There was sort of a pretty reasonable pile of footage to dig into. Certainly under 100, maybe under 50 hours of stuff to figure out what went into the film. When you do these Broadway shows, you build two armies. You build your film army, which is a normal size army, but then you have the army of the show, which is its own massive production. And so just to capture the concert was hundreds of people, 200 maybe more. We did 2 interview days, and those were probably 10-hour days with breaks in between. So yeah, maybe 15, maybe 12. Again, a really small amount compared to what I'm normally doing. And thankfully, the people I was interviewing were very forthcoming and told incredible stories very quickly.
Spring Awakening was so hard to describe. 1891 Germany rock music, there's children in it.
The gay scene, abortion, the sex, the suicide. There was never anything like this that's ever happened on stage.
So how did you decide when you became attached with this project that it wouldn't just be a recording of the reunion concert, but would actually feature a retrospective on the show's impact throughout the years?
That was in the mix from Jump Street. They always thought there should be a doc element, but there was a revelation for me when I really started studying the script in the book. And I really started digging into the lines and what the themes of the film were. And I realized the depths of what was there. That's when I was like, this isn't going to be a movie about a reunion. It is a movie about a reunion, but it's actually not. That's just a background for a much more, in my opinion, meaningful conversation, which is triggered by the themes of the actual original show. And it's crazy to think that it comes from a book from the late 1890s in Germany, because you watch Spring Awakening and you're like, these stories, this is an old story, and it feels like it couldn't be more relevant than it is now. There's 4 plot lines in the film. Most films have like an A and a B plot, but there are really 4 in this one. There's the story of what's in the play, the actual story of the play. There's the story of the rise to win the Tonys in 2006, the original production, and how they all came together. There's the story of the reunion, and it's in there, and it's great. And then there's this incredible love story between the whole cast, but really between Jonathan and Lea. And that's the one we didn't see coming. Jonathan had told us they were really close, but I didn't understand like how close they were. And that's when I realized like, wow, we actually have two lines of plot more than we actually need. And I want all of them in. And so we have this crazy map that we developed, which was like, this is how this song fits into this weird part from 2006. And this lyric fits into what happened in 2021. And we really drew the whole film out before we even started cutting it. Like, these are how all the connections. And I think that's where we get the depth in the film, is because we didn't just do, here's a show record. And that would have been amazing. And I know a lot of the fans want just that as well. And maybe someday that will be released. But I also hope the fans come to this with an open mind, because I think they're going to be really happy with what they get.
This was not about this reunion. This was an opportunity to be with those kids and see who they've become.
So being in that rehearsal room as the cast was preparing for this reunion concert, I have a couple questions, namely, who had the toughest time remembering their lines and diving back into things?
For them, this show is deeply personal. It's how they launch their careers. It's like their first love in a way. And so they cherish this show. And I think they were all nervous about doing it justice and not just sort of going up on stage and barfing out the songs or hitting bad notes. They were really, really conscious of this. And Lea is a workhorse. And back in 2006, she used to make Jonathan run their lines every performance before the show. For 2 years, they did this, right? So at the end of these rehearsals, her and Jonathan would hang back and they'd run their lines. Jonathan would run lines that in scenes he wasn't even in. He would like read the mother's parts to Lea. And they'd practice that. They'd practice the blocking. And from my own eyes, what I saw, Lea and Groff just like put in so much work. And I think it really shows up. I think all the performances are really strong, but I think what Groff and Lea bring to that performance, I can't believe they went that hard for a one night only reunion concert fundraiser.
We have 3 rehearsal days and then we're gonna perform it on stage. So I'm scared. I told Jonathan that I hadn't been that nervous or anxious since the day my son was born.
Who was the most emotional when they were sitting down with you for those interviews?
Well, Groff cries every time he speaks, first of all, which is really sweet. He's a very sweet man, and he's really got a humongous heart, and he's very open with his feelings. And I'm so happy that he shared as much as he did throughout this process. So the crying award definitely goes to Groff. I don't think anyone who knows him is going to be surprised about that. But it's an emotional story, and it's a really emotional film. And so there was a lot of really moving interviews. I cried multiple times while doing the interviews. If you're a person who's like actually like awake and like willing to feel your feelings, it's hard to get into some of those conversations and not be struck by them. And so when we really started digging into some of the heavy content of the show, and that is also in this film, honestly, there was a lot of tears. And there was a while where I couldn't watch the third act of the film without crying myself. We all cried a lot, but Groff cried the most.
God is this can't be it. Oh God, what a bitch.
You bring up Bitch of a Living, and there's one particular shot where it transitions from the original footage to what's happening in the rehearsal and in the live concert. How did you choose to balance how much of the original you were going to use versus what was happening in the present?
Of course, we shot this incredible concert, and we have beautiful footage, well lit, gorgeously shot by my crew, and you really want to lean on that. But then you have this incredible, I'll say it, not gorgeously shot 2006 kind of lock off shot, but there's so much like lightning in a bottle in this like one shot. Like I think it's a rehearsal the night before they opened is what that performance is. And it was really hard to decide, like, do we use our big, beautiful 2001 beautiful sound mix? They look incredible. Or do we go back to 2006? And we really played with it a lot. I'm not going to pretend that that was an easy decision. Those transitions that you're referring to, they happen a lot in the film. And I think it's sort of some of the magic sauce of it. And I love the way throughout the film, how they're all grown-ups now. They were teenagers when they did this show. But it's really these people who have matured so much as humans, going back to their first love, their show, and having the perspective that you have after 15 years and you're not a teenager anymore and you've gone out in the world and you've fallen in love or gotten married or had a kid or traveled the world or done a bunch of movies and just seen the entire planet. And now you come back to this little show. And so we really wanted to play those two things off of each other because one, just sort of from a cinematic standpoint, it's a fun transition, but much more deeply, much more profoundly as we got to sort of explore the depths of the original show. Now that the people who created these characters and created this show have the emotional tools to assess what they had done back in the day.
Through the cast and through the opportunity of getting to play this character, I had grown this strength, and it changed my whole life.
Now, you mentioned the relationship between Lea Michele and Jonathan Groff, and I have to ask you about a revelation that Lea Michele made, which is that she showed Jonathan Groff her vagina with a desk lamp.
Yes.
How did that information come up in your interview with Lea, and how did you broach that topic then in your interview with Jonathan, who said, "I can't believe Lea told you that"?
I was probing about their relationship. And I had no idea that this was what her answer was going to be, but I had asked a series of questions and finally she just launched into that. And I was like, well, hold on a second. What are you talking about? And she laid it out beat for beat for beat. And I was like, I can't believe she's saying this, except that like, I find her to be a very open person. She really just shared like really profound information throughout the process. And a lot of times when you're making a documentary, you're coaxing someone out of their shell. You're trying to find the story behind the story. You're trying to get past their initial answer because their initial answer has been said 100 times and it's boring. And you really want the answer behind the answer, or really to get down to the meat of it. And I'll say in this process, there was very little of that for me. It was really just like, here's a good question, I believe, and here's an excellent answer from the person I asked it of. So I wasn't probing for that answer. She offered it up. And when I then had Jonathan next after her, he was gobsmacked that she had told me that, but I don't think he was probably surprised because he knows her so well. And I think he was like, he says, I can't believe she told you that. But I also think it wasn't probably that surprised because that's who she is. She's going to say it,
The things that we confront in this show are not things you can learn in school. And they're things that help people survive.
That's kind of what got us through it every night, knowing how important it was to tell that story.
In your opinion, why is Spring Awakening still relevant today, 15 years after it made this huge impact?
One of my favorite lines in our film is Lauren Pritchard, towards the end of the film, says that the theme, something like the themes of Spring Awakening are really profound, and they're not the kind of things they teach you in school. And they're important, and they can kind of save your life. You have to learn some of these things. Sadly, we still are in a lot of places we were 15 years ago. Stephen Sater, who was the spark that began this stage production, says that he was watching the events of Columbine, and he says in the film, I wanted to create something that would touch the troubled hearts of youth, because he was watching the youth get torn apart. And then you go back to the original German text, and like it's all about the imbecility of adults. And that's from 1890 something. So I wish I had like a cheery answer to that question, but I think it's actually that even though we are progressing as a society, and this is probably, even though it all feels like everything's messed up, we're probably in one of the best eras of human existence that's ever happened. But we still have a lot of work to do. And one of the reasons why I am so proud of this film isn't just because we shot it in 5 days and made it really quick, and I'm really happy with how it all came out. What I'm most proud about this film is the messages contained within it. And I think a lot about the kids out there who might be a little bit different, who might be struggling with their sexuality, who might be struggling with having been mistreated by an adult, who might be struggling with suicidal thoughts and feeling alone. I know I want this film to travel far and wide in the hopes that someone who needs to hear the messages contained within this film does, and realizes, oh, I'm not alone. There are people like me out there. I just have to find my people. I have to move to New York City or whatever it is, like to you know what I mean? To like get out of whatever sort of pigeonhole they're stuck in. Yeah, that's my hope for it.
I would not have survived the experience if it wasn't for all of you.
I learned that dreams can come true.